All right, so these excerpts you sent over from this Bible study on Genesis, they really kind of got me thinking.
Yeah.
It's all about what it means to be made in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about existing, right?
All right.
It's about reflecting something much greater. And then there's this whole concept of humanity as the pinnacle of creation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, where do we even begin to unpack all of that?
It is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the text itself doesn't really give us like a nice little definition of
Right.
what made in God's image actually means.
Right.
But it's like a good mystery, right? There are clues
Okay.
scattered throughout.
So it's less about looking like God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And more about...
What are actions,
Yeah.
our abilities?
Exactly.
Okay.
The source points to things like our capacity for reason, for creativity, for love.
Yeah.
Even having a sense of right and wrong.
Right.
Because like we have these tools that are built in
Yeah.
that in a way mirror aspects of God's nature.
I see what you mean. It's not about a physical resemblance.
Right.
It's about having these capacities that set us apart from the rest of creation.
Yes.
The study actually uses a great analogy.
Oh, yeah.
It says we're like a statue
Okay.
representing a king
Uh-huh.
in a distant land.
Yeah.
We embody something of his presence even if we don't look exactly like him.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And that leads us to this question of purpose.
Okay.
If we're reflecting God's image,
Yeah.
what are we meant to do
Yeah.
with that reflection?
Okay. Here's where it gets really intriguing for me.
Okay.
The source highlights this detail about God breathing life into Adam,
Yes.
and it's described so much more intimately
Right.
than the creation of anything else. You
Yeah.
almost get a sense of like intentionality.
It's like a divine spark, right?
Yes.
The source suggests that this breath symbolizes this unique connection
Yeah.
between God and humanity.
Okay.
And with that connection
Yeah.
comes purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it dives into Genesis 1.28, where God talks about humanity having dominion over the earth.
Now, dominion, that's a word that could get a little loaded.
Yeah.
I think some people might interpret that as having free reign to exploit the earth.
You're right. It can be easily misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
But the source encourages us to view it more in terms of stewardship.
Okay.
It's less about ruling over creation and more about caring for something that ultimately belongs to someone else.
So we're entrusted with this responsibility
Yes.
as God's representative.
Exactly.
Which makes sense when we think about being made in his image.
Yes.
But the source doesn't stop there with stewardship.
It takes it a step further.
It does.
It really does.
Okay.
What's fascinating is how this Bible study expands the concept of stewardship beyond just the environment.
So we're talking about more than just recycling and planting trees.
Absolutely.
Okay, what other areas does it cover?
Well, for starters, it talks about the stewardship of resources.
That makes sense, but what does that look like practically?
The source gets quite specific here.
Okay.
It's not just about the planet's resources.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how we manage our time,
Mm-hmm.
our money,
Right.
even our possessions.
Okay.
Are we using them in a way that aligns with God's values?
So it's about asking ourselves,
Exactly.
what are my priorities?
Yes.
Because let's face it, how we spend our time and money speaks volumes about what we truly value.
Exactly. And that leads us to another area the source discusses,
Okay.
stewardship of our health.
Now that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I can see how our physical health would tie in.
Right.
You know, we're called to take care of the bodies we've been given.
Yes.
But the source also emphasizes spiritual health, right?
Yes. And it challenges us to think about how we're nurturing both.
Okay.
Are we prioritizing things like rest,
Mm-hmm.
exercise,
Yeah.
and healthy eating?
Mm-hmm.
And what about spiritual practices
Okay.
like prayer or spending time in nature?
It's like we're recognizing that our well-being,
Yes.
both physical and spiritual,
It's exactly-
isn't just about us.
Right.
We're caring for something that's been entrusted to us.
Exactly.
Fully.
Precisely. And that brings us to the final area of stewardship that the source explores,
Okay.
our relationships.
I think this might be the most challenging one
Yeah.
for a lot of people,
Yeah.
myself included.
Mm-hmm.
We can sometimes forget that relationships also require stewardship.
It's true. The source asks us to consider how we're reflecting God's love in our interactions with others.
Yeah.
Are we being patient,
Uh-huh.
kind of forgiving?
Yeah.
Are we building others up,
Yeah.
or are we tearing them down?
It really challenges us to examine those everyday interactions, doesn't it?
It does.
Because if God is love,
Yes.
and we're made in his image,
Right.
then how we treat others is a direct reflection of that image.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
And it's something that really stays with you
Yeah.
long after you finish reading.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it?
It does.
It really makes you think about, are we treating the people around us, like our families, our coworkers, even strangers,
Right.
with the same kind of care and respect
Yeah.
that we would? Something precious that's been entrusted to us.
It's a humbling thought.
Yeah.
And it really ties back to this idea of what it means to be made in God's image. The source doesn't just leave this as some kind of abstract concept.
Right.
It challenges us to actually put this into action.
It's about more than just head knowledge.
Right.
It's about living it out.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like stewardship in all these different areas of our lives becomes like the way we do that.
Exactly. It's fascinating how the source connects these ideas.
Right.
It's saying that being made in God's image isn't just some static thing. It's an ongoing process
Okay.
of reflecting God's qualities through our actions, through responsible stewardship.
So it's less about like achieving perfection and
Right.
more about striving to align our actions with our beliefs. Like constantly asking ourselves, how can I better reflect God's image in this situation?
That's a great way to frame it. And, the source actually offers some really practical steps
Okay.
that we can take to embrace this idea of stewardship in our everyday lives.
Like what?
Well, for example, it talks about setting aside dedicated time for both physical and spiritual health.
That makes sense, but that can look different for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
For one person, it might be, going for a daily walk or a run.
Right.
For someone else, it might be joining a yoga class or a Bible study group.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you
Uh-huh.
and making that conscious effort to prioritize your well-being. The source also talks about aligning our spending with God's priorities,
Oh, yeah.
which I think could be a real eye-opener for a lot of people.
You're telling me, I know I've had to like take a hard look at my own spending habits and ask myself, am I using my resources in a way that honors God and serves others, or am I mostly driven by my own wants and desires?
It's an honest question that we all have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the challenge of nurturing our relationships intentionally. This could look like, making time for family dinners,
Uh-huh.
being more present with our loved ones,
Okay.
or even offering forgiveness in a difficult situation.
Those are all great examples. It's about putting love into action.
Yes.
And remembering that our relationships are both a precious gift and a responsibility.
That's the beauty of stewardship, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not about what we possess,
Okay.
but about how we manage what we've been given, whether that's time,
Right.
talents, resources, or relationships.
This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective. I
Yeah.
think we often get caught up in the stuff and forget about the bigger picture.
I understand what you mean. And the source ends with a powerful call to action.
Okay.
It encourages readers to identify one small change
Okay.
they can make this week
Mm-hmm.
to start living out this principle of stewardship.
That's a great challenge. It makes it feel achievable.
Right.
But I wonder if we could even take it a step further. What if, instead of just one small change this week, we try to look at every decision through the lens of stewardship? Like before we do something or spend money or react to someone,
Right.
we just pause for a second
Yeah.
and we ask ourselves, how can I reflect God's image in this moment?
Now, that's a profound challenge.
It is, right?
It's almost like a constant state of mindfulness.
Right.
Being aware of how our actions, big or small,
Yeah.
can be a form of stewardship.
It feels like it could be really transformative,
Yeah.
but also a little daunting.
Mm-hmm.
Is it even possible to live that way, like all the time?
I don't think it's about achieving perfection.
Okay.
It's more about the continual striving.
Right.
It's like we're always in this dance
Yeah.
between our human nature and this calling to reflect something greater.
I love that analogy, the dance of stewardship. So to bring it all together, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to what it means to be made in God's image. It's not just about appearance, right? It's about reflecting God's qualities through how we live,
Yes.
how we love, how we use our resources,
Yeah.
our time, even our reactions to difficult people.
And stewardship becomes the practical way we actually live that out.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that everything we have, our talents, our possessions, the very breath we breathe,
Right.
is a gift, and we're called to manage it responsibly.
We're not just here to exist.
No.
We're here to live with purpose.
Absolutely.
And this source material really drives home the idea that stewardship in all its forms is how we tap into that purpose.
We're called to be reflections of God's love, grace, and wisdom in a world that desperately needs it.
What an incredible thought to carry with us.
Yeah.
So as we go about our week, let's think about how we can be better stewards of all that we've been given.
Yeah.
How can we reflect God's image more clearly in our choices, our words, and even in how we treat those who are difficult to love?
Let's allow this deep dive to be more than just information.
Right.
Let it be a catalyst for real transformation, inspiring us to live lives that truly honor the one in whose image we were made.